everyone, I'm Captain Logan, and today I'm going to tell you how I felt about Jumangi: The Next Level, a sequel to a sequel/soft reboot that I thought was potentially ripe for massive sequelitis, and that I thought was kind of unnecessary and was clearly a thing that was probably never thought of as a thing that was going to exist. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that Sony was hoping for a big franchise when they started this, but I don't think anybody expected Welcome to the Jungle to be a billion-dollar movie. It was absolutely crazy. I'm sure while they were making it, there was a lot of, I mean, we could end up making another one, but this will probably just break even or do just well enough. I don't think anybody expected that to do the guns that it did, and so naturally, of course, it ends up being a franchise right away. A sequel gets greenlit, and I'm like, I'm not saying you can't make a good movie with a good sequel with this premise, but the idea that you would bring back the same actors for the same avatars and kind of do the same thing all over again, I was a little leery of it. I was hoping it would be a lot of fun. I was certainly excited to see this cast back together again if new, enjoyable things were done with it, and wouldn't you know it, the name of the game here is consistency of quality. This is absolutely as much fun as the first movie. I don't know if I would say that it's quite as good, but it's real darn close. And it avoids a lot, very smartly, avoids a lot of the issues I was afraid that it would have. So the next level, and by the way, I'm a little bit late on this. I'm a couple weeks late, so a lot of you guys have probably already seen this a few days ago or a couple weeks ago, and seen reviews and stuff already. So I'm a little late to the party, but some folks were asking if I was going to see this and if I'd review it, so I went ahead and finally decided to do that, and I'm glad I did. So we've got the original 4 kids who got stuck in Jumangi last time, contriving a way to get them back in there again. Spencer is insecure and not sure of himself, just like he was in the first place, although I wouldn't say that this is character regression. I think we do a pretty good job of depicting teenagers as teenagers, and I'm believing that these kids are still in the midst of finding themselves. It's great that that first coming-of-age story doesn't end with, and we've got everything figured out. We got a few things figured out. I like that Spencer is very, very comfortable as Bravestone, but doesn't really totally know yet exactly who he is and how to take the things he learned from being Bravestone and completely apply those to real life. He's doing okay, but he's got some issues, and he and his girlfriend who got together in the first movie are not totally working out, but it's not that sequel thing of let's just break them up off screen and move on when it was kind of fun to see them together. I think they have a lot of chemistry. Both sets of actors do, and I appreciate that it's a complex relationship. I mean, not like the most complicated, intriguing, fascinating thing or anything, but it's a long-distance relationship that is a thing everybody can relate to, that is very difficult to keep together, but it isn't like, well, he made one mistake or she made one mistake and now they're not speaking together, and let's force a dramatic situation where it's supposed to be fun to watch them awkwardly dealing with each other. It isn't that. They're not angry with each other, they're just not sure how to be a couple, and I think that's wonderfully realistic, and I think it's a decently compelling drama, and I like that a lot in this. And so he decides to go back into Jumangi just so that he can feel what it was like to be Bravestone again. And it does feel like a little bit of an easy way to contrive this situation. I'm won over by it enough by the end, mostly because, and hopefully not giving too much away here, we're set up at the end for a potential third sequel, which I'm sure this will get. My theater, by the way, was packed, and this has already been out a little while. I haven't looked at numbers, but I'm sure it's doing fine, and I know a lot of people are going to see it, and there's a potential third sequel set up at the end that makes it very clear that we are not going to do this again in a sequel. It's not going to be put everybody back in the video game again, or at least if it is that, it's going to be some other stuff also. And so that was really smart. And so I was won over a little bit more on figuring out some way to make this whole mess happen a second time, because I know for sure that they're not going to do exactly this a third time. And like I said, it avoids a lot of pitfalls, for a lot of standard sequel pitfalls. It's not Home Alone 2, it's not Back to the Future 2, it's not let's put everybody in the same formula and have them in a lot of the same sequences over and over again in the same order that we did in the first movie. Anytime we repeat ourselves in this, in my opinion, pretty much it's because it's for the sake of a joke that bears repeating. The whole thing about the cake that makes Fridge's avatar from the first movie explode comes back several times in this, and it's funny every time. And so there's a couple of things like that. The smoldering intensity thing with Bravestone we're still doing, and in this we come up with kind of a spin on that, so it starts happening at like really inopportune times, and it's pretty amusing. I think the initial setup is, like I said, a little bit easy, and part of that is also real world stuff where we have a new character coming in. This is Danny Glover's character, who is an old partner of Spencer's grandfather's, and his grandfather, who is played by Danny DeVito. We have basically this whole movie is our original 4 characters stuck in the game now with 2 elderly popular actors with the first name of Danny. I don't know if that's intentional, but it's kind of amusing. And they are old partners, and they have a character arc together that's all about getting old and moving on from the past and the pros and cons to being elderly and learning how you're never able to hang on to all of the things you love your whole life, and that includes relationships, and that people have to move on. And we have this wonderful kind of comparison contrast between that kind of couple, that odd couple, that platonic friendship couple, and Spencer and his girlfriend, and that is a young couple figuring out how to put a relationship back together, or figure out if they need to move on, whichever it's going to be. I won't give that away. They both have to learn from each other and figure out the ways in which the other person kind of completes them and makes them a better person, and why they needed that person in their life in the first place. And there's this really nice kind of age gap exploration in this. It isn't the tired, sometimes irritating, like old people being annoyed with the young people and young people being annoyed with the old people. We're not really playing that angle too much, but it's more just from the viewer's perspective anyway, looking at these 2 dual character arcs unfolding, and kind of comparing and contrasting, and seeing again the kind of bright side and negative side to being really young and uncertain of yourself and not knowing who you are yet, and being old and starting to get decrepit, not being able to do the things you could when you were younger, but all the life experiences that you learn from that. And that the big thing that, of course, both sets of people have in common is that you need friends, and you need companionship, and you need other people to help you discover yourself and figure out who you are. And so there's a pretty decent story here, and it's not at all the story from the first movie, but it is building on the themes and the ideas from that. So that was all about youth and, to some degree, mortality, and this is about youth and aging and also mortality. So let me get into best thing, worst thing. I think my favorite thing here is playing around with the body switching, and this becomes very much a body swap comedy. The first movie, of course, has that to some degree, but it's limited in that it's just a few characters who get to be played by 2 different sets of actors, and so you meet those kids at the beginning, and then you have these 4 actors playing them the whole movie, and that's a lot of fun. But here we up the ante with that, and we get really silly with it, and there's admittedly kind of an easy plot device with a body of water that allows you to body switch for some reason. I don't know why that's built into the game. I guess it's maybe sort of the equivalent of having a mechanic in a game that would let if you have a multiplayer game, sort of like in the Lego games, I guess, where you might have a mechanic that allows one player to switch characters with another player. I guess that's kind of what this is, but I'm not sure why it's built into the game the way it is. But anyway, so there's a device for it, and anytime they touch that water, it lets people switch their minds, and it's a lot of fun watching these actors playing all of these different characters, and I think that's my favorite thing about it, contrived though it may be. I really enjoyed watching Dwayne Johnson play a Danny DeVito, and it was a lot of fun watching Kevin Hart play Danny Glover. I think Hart absolutely nailed Glover. I think he does almost a perfect spot-on impression. I haven't seen Danny Glover in anything for a really long time, and I was a little bit bummed that he's really only here at the beginning and only for a couple of scenes, but I felt like I had him through almost the whole movie because Kevin Hart was doing such a spot-on impression of him, and we have a couple of actors in this attempting to do Danny DeVito, and they're both a lot of fun, and their attempts at nailing that are really, really amusing. I don't want to give away who does it in the second part, but there's an actor that does it later who I think is doing more of a Joe Pesci impression than a Danny DeVito, but it still sort of kind of works. I guess tied for best thing, and these are connected things, is much more so than the first movie. I felt like I was watching almost the same performance throughout, regardless of who was playing what character. I never got lost as to who was supposed to be whom, and we, like I said, quite a bit of body switching, and I never had a difficult time remembering who was supposed to be who, or even just going, okay, I know that's supposed to be that person, but I'm not really buying it. I think the VIP here is probably Kevin Hart, and what's or the MVP rather, the most valuable player here is Kevin Hart, in that he's redeeming himself, I think, from the first movie. One of my big complaints there was that I felt like Kevin Hart was kind of just doing Kevin Hart, and I like him, and I think he's very funny. There is, by the way, I should mention, a Netflix series about his life, this kind of documentary series in, I think, 5 parts that just came out recently that I highly recommend. It's really interesting. Just seeing like how hard this guy works and how he puts in like a 26-hour day, and his strengths and weaknesses, and his life foibles, and the way he wears his heart on his sleeve, and the way he is an open book and kind of doesn't mind everyone knowing everything about him. He is really interesting, and a guy that I had not really followed that hard. So it was really interesting watching this movie, knowing now what I know about Kevin Hart. But the first movie, I felt like he wasn't really playing the kid, Fridge, so much as he was just playing Kevin Hart. They felt like two totally different people. And in this, when he starts doing Danny Glover, I felt like he was finally really trying to do the performance that the first actor gave and become that guy. And that was great. And then what's weird is he later will get to play Fridge again, and because he has to be consistent with that first performance, he's doing the same thing he did in the first movie, which I can't complain about now because it would be really weird if all of a sudden he was playing it totally differently. And I wonder if after this experience doing Danny Glover, he wouldn't have played that differently had he had the option to. But I think very smartly here the director or both chose to, and I should mention this is the same director. It's very consistently directed and plotted, and the comedy and the pacing of it, it's all very consistent with that first movie. But I felt like but I feel like he might have done something different with it if he had it to do all over again the first time around. But I think it was really smart not to do that. Jack Black, as always, is absolutely hilarious, and again with his multiple characters, it was really fun watching, especially him and Dwayne Johnson play. Kevin Johnson's a friend of mine. Dwayne Johnson is the two of them especially, and like all four of, well, almost, I guess not all four, just three, because Karen Gillan is playing the same person that she played in the first movie, and she has that consistently all the way through. I don't think she ever switches with anybody else, and she's kind of our consistent, almost POV character, which I think was also a really smart move, and I love her so much in that role. I'm kind of glad we didn't really mess with that too much, but I liked it, especially Dwayne Johnson and Jack Black. I'm seeing them do a bunch of, or at least a couple of different characters, and I'm not even seeing The Rock and Jack Black all that much. I'm kind of just seeing the characters they're playing, and I think they've really solidified this. They've really figured out how to play these different characters and where they never really have a role. And I think like a real role all their own. They're always these other pre-established characters that we've already seen. And I think everybody in the game does a really good job of hamming it up, and they know that they're these like two-dimensional melodramatic video game characters. Everybody gets what they're in, including the villain, and I think that's wonderful. So my worst thing, my big complaint with this, and it doesn't kill the movie by any stretch, but we're told initially that something is wrong with the game, and that's in the trailer too. Like, it seems like it's broken, and that is never fleshed out and discussed again after we're initially told that. It really plays very much ultimately like what the title suggests. We're just in the game again, and we're doing a different level than we did last time. It feels like initially that idea of something is wrong with the game, it's busted, is just there for dramatic effect initially, and to feel like the stakes are upped somehow. And I really expected the rules to start being different, and it feels like there's a mystery initially. There's this talk about how each character has a new strength and sometimes even a new weakness they didn't have before. It's never explained why those things changed. There are new avatars that weren't there before. I don't know why there are new playable characters. Is it just that there are more people that came in than 4 this time? I never know. This is somewhat related. I never know why the 2 elderly guys are brought into the game. They're never anywhere near where the game was. I don't know why they came in, but that's just kind of what the movie wanted to do, so they're there. So it's like, the premise itself ends up being a conceit. Like, I'm cool with the conceit of the game, and I'm cool with some of the conceits, of course, inside the game, but it ends up being a little bit too many conceits on top of each other, where after a while I'm like, okay, there's not really any reason for anything, and once we start the ball rolling and it starts being a little bit about these, interesting character parallels and character arcs that I discussed, and then also just the situation being used for a lot of really amusing jokes. I mean, I laughed a lot through this. I really enjoyed it. But that's kind of the mythology is kind of generic and kind of pointless. It's really just there to facilitate those two things. And like I don't know why our main characters don't even have to pick their avatars now, why they just get sucked in. Like, all of that is kind of a mystery at first, and then it feels like by the end we're kind of just supposed to ignore it. But again, I appreciate that it's not just the same story all over again. I was checked out a little bit during the 3rd act, I must say. I think it starts to, I don't want to even say degenerate, but it's a little bit of a, typical go grab the artifact thing at the end, which for the sake of the video game is of course fine. I'm not going to complain that the video game plot is an artifact finding mission. It's a video game, although I did appreciate that there's a little bit of backstory for some of the video game characters as well, and even though it is still melodramatic and there are of course archetypes and two-dimensional characters, it's kind of fun that they also start to get fleshed out a little bit also. I would have appreciated if more than just the main two characters from the first movie, Spencer and his girlfriend. Oh yeah, Martha. Once again, it's kind of more about them than it is anybody else. And then again, you get the new elderly characters, and I think they kind of get as much to do, and it's as much their dual protagonist story as it is Spencer and Martha. But Fridge and Bethany are once again just kind of there. They're kind of the anchor characters, and they don't really change and grow too much. It would have been nice to get a little bit more with them, and maybe even a little bit more about their Avatar characters. And I did think it was maybe a little bit obvious and a little bit typical that the third act is our original four characters have to, hopefully this isn't giving away too much, but again, it's typical. I think this is kind of expected, and this is the complaint, that the four of them have to get back in the Avatar bodies that they were in the first place and go and save the day. And I guess I'm glad that we get to see them do that again. Like, it won me over in that it was entertaining and I enjoyed it, but it was predictable. It was kind of exactly what I expected to happen. So I don't know, like, it doesn't have sequelitis in the sense that, again, it's not the exact same story again, but in the ways where it does the typical sequel thing, it does it more intelligently than a lot of sequels do, and it's a crowd pleaser, and it knows which of those things an audience is going to really enjoy. And so, I don't know. I'm complaining about that simply because it was predictable, but it also, again, was satisfying and crowd-pleasing, and I enjoyed watching it. So take that for what it's worth. But I'm absolutely feeling it. I really enjoyed this. Sony's got a real solid franchise on their hands, which I cannot say about a lot of their other franchises. And there is absolutely no doubt going to be a third movie, and it's not going to be this premise again. Very smartly, again, at the end, they basically have a character come right out and say, we can't do this again. We have milked this premise for all it is worth, and then we, admittedly, in a sequel-baity kind of way, set up a different premise for a sequel. But I'm glad that was done, because like you might look at it and go, well, of course, now it's a franchise, we gotta make 1 billion of these, and we're gonna milk this forever, and, beat the dead horse and just absolutely kill it. But, it's nice sometimes when things like this don't feel the need to make a big deal out of coming back. There's gonna be a sequel. I think in this case, it needed to be done, and it's not just about, don't worry, kids, there's gonna be more of these because you loved the first one. It made $1 billion. This read, that's part of it, certainly, but this read just as much to me as, nobody panic, don't worry, we're not going to keep giving you the exact same thing over and over again. And it really felt like these guys thought maybe there was a little bit more to do with the same premise, and I really respect the creativity and the thoughtfulness that went into making that premise work again for a second movie. Enjoyed this a lot. I will absolutely buy it, just like they did the first one, and surprisingly looking forward to a third one. I have some ideas about what I think they're going to do with it. I don't want to discuss that here because I'm not doing a spoiler cast. Maybe I'll talk about that down the road on the Captain Logan show or something, but I've got theories. I think I know what they're going to do with the third movie to some degree. But anyway, thanks a bunch for watching. If you saw this movie, leave your comments. Let me know what you thought of it. In the meantime, I was Captain Logan, and I'll see you again with another new movie review not too far down the road. Bye, folks.